Do you ever cook up a beat, crank up the 808, and before it's as loud as you want it to be, the track is already distorting? Or you spend hours mixing a beat just to send it to an artist for them to say, this will sound amazing when it's mixed. Today I'm going to show you how you can get your drums to hit hard without distorting, and how to even get them to sound good on phone speakers, AirPods, or other cheap speakers, because most of your listeners aren't going to be listening on professional speakers. Every one of these tips is incredibly powerful, and some of the last ones I rarely see producers doing, so I definitely recommend watching all of them. The first step is gain staging, which is where you set the levels of every single layer in your track. The most important rule is the layer you want to stand out, you want that one to be the loud one, so mix all the other layers a lot lower. To use this beat as an example, I have all the melody layers here, and as you can see, they're quite a lot quieter than you'd expect. As you can see, they're hitting at around -18 decibels, which gives so much room for the drums to come in. Something I also recommend doing when going and setting the levels is using an EQ. If you have a look at this layer here, if you turn your earphones up, you'll be able to hear some of the low end of this piano. And by removing that with an EQ, you're leaving room for the bass frequencies, which are going to hit in this section here, which is going to make it so much easier when going and mixing this track and adding lots of volume to the 808. Then go through the rest of the layers one by one and mix the volume. This is the perfect time to go and use a reference track to see if your levels are hitting the same as other similar beats in the genre. It's also a really good time to take a break, come back and then listen to it and see if any of the layers stand out as too loud. If you have to go and redo this 5 or 10 times, it's honestly worth it because the actual leveling is 99% of the problem. If you want all these samples plus 10,000 more that are all 100% royalty free, click the link to get the Emotional Essence library, which is 90% off, and it has royalty free samples, MIDI, live vocals, and more for every single emotion of music. The next step is adding saturation or distortion to the bass. This isn't really going to make it louder, but it's going to make it sound so much more full and give so much texture to it, and it gives the impression to the listeners that it is louder than it is. This is without distortion. And this is with distortion. If you have a look at where it's hitting at before, it's at around -15 decibels. With the distortion, it's hitting at essentially the same volume, but it sounds so much more full. And of course, you can use plugins like Sausage Fattener. But I recommend having a look at the level of your bass before you add a plugin like this, and just make sure that it's not making it way louder, because that can mess with your gain staging. The third step is mastering. This is where you can use a soft clipper, a compressor, or a maximizer to go and increase the volume of your track and really boost up the volume of your drums. For example, you can use a fruity soft clipper, turn the post up, and it will sound louder like this. You could use something like the knock clipper. Or you can use something like Isotope Ozone Maximizer, which will sound like this. And as you can see, it's lowering the volume as it's clipping. So you're able to make the bass and the 808 and the whole beat sound a lot louder without it sounding distorted. At this point, your levels are correct. You have some cool effects on the bass to make it sound even warmer. And you've gone and increased the volume of your track by using one of these plugins. The fourth step is to use some sidechain. Go into your kick, add a volume monitoring plugin like Fruity Peak Controller, then go onto your 808, right click on the volume and click link to controller. I'm going to add the peak plus LFO for the kick. And I'm going to change this here to inverted and click accept. And inside the settings for the peak controller, you're going to increase the bass knob to get the 808 roughly where it was when you were mixing the track. And as the kick comes in, it lowers the volume of the 808, which gives the impression that the kick is much louder than it is. You don't just have to do this for the bass if you feel like it doesn't fit. You can go into the hi-hat, right click on it, click link to controller, and do the exact same thing. I recommend going and increasing the volume. As you can see, it's lowering the volume of the hi-hat when the kick comes in, which gives the impression that the beat is hitting way louder than it is without increasing the volume. The fifth step is the actual arrangement of your track. If you have too many layers coming in, it's going to be really, really overcrowded. In this section here where all the melody layers come in, I've actually taken out the drums. Something else you can do while arranging your track is changing the timing of the kick and the 808. This 808 has this note hitting here where there isn't a kick, same as this note here and this note here. Not having a kick gives so much room for the 808, and you can actually go and boost the volume of those notes because now there's so much more room in the lower frequencies. When you're having a look at the chord progression for your melody and you're picking which note to put the 808 on, it can be really helpful to choose some of the higher notes or add some 808 rolls or fills up at these higher notes because they're going to sound so much more fat on cheaper speakers because your listeners will actually be able to hear them. Something else you can do is stagger the timing. You can actually add an attack by adding a gap at the start of the 808. This gives a little bit of room for the kick to hit before the 808 comes in. Another arrangement trick you can do is delay when the kick comes in. For example, if we start without the kick, it's going to sound a bit emptier. And then when the kick actually comes in, it adds so much punch to the low end. With these 5 tricks, you should be able to have really hard hitting beats without them sounding distorted. I recommend saving this video so you can come back to it later and even have it on a separate monitor while you're mixing to make sure you go and use all these tricks. If you want all the samples I use to make these beats, as well as over 10,000 more that are all royalty-free, click the link in the description to get the Emotional Essence library with royalty-free samples, MIDI, and free bonuses for every emotion. If you want to learn other mixing tricks, how to make beats like top producers, and more, click one of the recommended videos.